Hello there, Anthony Jacquin here from the Jacquin Hypnosis Academy, and welcome. Over the course of the next 5 days, I'm going to be sharing with you everything that you need to know about hypnosis. A bold claim, right? I'm going to attempt to teach you everything you need to know about hypnotizing, how to elicit all of the hypnotic phenomena, and I'm going to show you how to do that by unpacking one single technique. This particular technique is something that my father, Freddie Jacquin, and I teach on all of our courses. If you're already familiar with our work, I guarantee that you've come across this before. If you're not, or you're completely new to hypnosis, that's just fine too. Because as I said, everything that you need to know to get started and even to be an effective hypnotist is contained within this technique. So we're going to go real deep, and I would encourage you to stay with it because as the days go on, more and more hypnotic secrets will be revealed. Please don't underestimate the impact, the effectiveness and the utility of this one tool. Are you ready? Good. Then let's begin. I have often said over the years on my courses that if I could just teach you everything there is to know about this one thing, you'd almost have everything that you need to get out there and do good work as a hypnotist. So the technique is what we call the Jacquin Fingerlock. It's called the Jacquin Fingerlock because it was created by my father, Freddie Jacquin. It is an extension of the very well-known technique called magnetic fingers, only we push it a little bit further and encourage a deeper, stronger experience. So what I want to talk about today specifically is the keywords, if you like, to look out for are instructions and suggestions. Let me begin by just running through the technique real quick. Okay. Would you like to try something? Excellent. I'm going to give you some simple instructions. If I ask you to imagine something, I'd like you to do your best to imagine it. However you imagine that is fine. And if I ask you to find a feeling, then I'd like you to do your best to find that feeling. Is that clear? Good. Sitting comfortably? Okay, I'd like you to place both hands out in front of you. Clasp your hands together, palms together, thumbs crossed on top. Bend your elbows like you're making a desperate prayer. Good. Put your first fingers up about an inch apart. Look at the gap between your fingers, not at me, because in a moment they will touch. And when they touch, allow your eyes to close and squeeze tight. Now go out into a fantasy and think about the person who is dearest to you on this planet. If there's more than one, see more than one. See their eyes, see them smiling. Hear their voice, hear them laughing, and feel what you feel for them. And as you feel that, and as you listen to my voice, your fingers are becoming stuck together, locked together, as if superglued and stuck. Even the fingers on the outside stuck fast. When you realize they're feeling stuck, raise your hands a little higher. That's right, completely stuck to the point that you could try and pull them apart and find they're stuck fast. I know it's a strange feeling. The harder you try and pull them apart, the tighter they stick. Put some effort in. You're a strong person, pull as hard as you can. That's right, in a moment I'm going to clap my hands, your eyes will open and your hands remain stuck fast. You'll look at them as if they're somebody else's hands. Good, open your eyes and look at those hands. Now in a moment I'm going to clap again and those hands will become unstuck and you'll be ready for your next instruction. Good, you can hold on to all those good feelings. All right, so That is the Jacquin Fingerlock. Again, I know you may well be familiar with it already. I want you to think of this like, a gem, a crystal, hung with a beam of light going through it, and it's turning slowly in the light, and it's giving up more of its beauty with each turn. We're seeing another facet, another side as time goes on. Perhaps you might want to think of it like, a musical scale. I'm sure some of you have learned the blues scale. Would it be too much to say that, if you could really, fully understand and be able to utilize that scale, you would be able to play the blues, right? You really would be able to play, 100 years of music. You may be into martial arts. I used to study Wing Chun Kung Fu. It's like a close range fighting system. And within 3 hand positions, the 3 poisons, as they're sometimes called, Tan, Fook and Bong, the entire system, which could take you 15, 20 years to get anywhere near mastering, is contained within these 3 hand positions. I know it sounds over the top, but again, almost everything that I might wish to teach you, certainly in a 1 or 2 day training, can be found within this technique. So let's talk about the setup, instructions and suggestions. In the next lesson, we will then get more deeply into the applications. First of all, it's important to understand that hypnosis, despite its appearances, especially in performance, despite some of the cultural ideas about it, is a collaborative event, a collaborative exercise, where the hypnotist and the participant, sometimes they're called the subject, the hypnotist and the participant collaborate to create the hypnotic effect. And we'll come to what the hypnotic effect is in just a moment's time. So it's important, if you're going to do this kind of work, to clarify the role of your participant. So I'm going to say something along the lines of, can I show you something interesting? Or, you look like an interesting group of people. I'm a hypnotist. Are you up for playing some mind games with me? Can I show you something interesting about yourself? I want to show you, this kind of trick of the imagination. Right? There are many different ways I may put it, but I'm trying to get some curiosity and some interest early on. Whether I use the word hypnosis or not, this technique will still be effective. Obviously, I'm normally presenting myself as a hypnotist because that's who I am, but trust that you could do this in any context at all. It could be an exercise in focus, it could be, just something interesting. It will still work. So first of all, I want to get that buy-in with a bit of curiosity. Then I'm going to lay out my instructions. I'm going to give you some instructions. They're real simple. If I ask you to imagine something, I'd like you to do your best to imagine it. It doesn't have to be perfectly vivid or perfectly clear. If I ask you to imagine blue, you could think of the sky, you could think of the word, you could say it yourself, but rather than desperately trying to think of red, or even worse, just sitting there and doing nothing at all, if you want to have this experience, if I ask you to use your imagination, I want you to let your imagination go there. Secondly, if I ask you to find a feeling, I'd like you to do your best to find that feeling, right? If I ask you to think about your favourite food, maybe your favourite place to eat that food, you'd probably close your eyes and you'd be able to evoke that within you. That's exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. Okay, so we've got some buy-in, we've got some curiosity, and you heard a short and a longer version there, if you like, of my pre-talk, strange term, but kind of, the setup, the instructions of engagement, that's how I put it. There's a role. You've got something to do. That thing is, imagine, engage your feelings. And that's exactly what we're going to do. With this particular technique, sometimes I will go further and say, and if you do this, I guarantee you, I promise you, this will make you feel good. This is something you can take away with you. You could even try this on a friend later. Right? So I'm going to keep that promise. They are going to feel good. And secondly, by saying this is something you can learn, something you could particularly, you could perhaps do later on. Again, this maintains a high level of curiosity because, everyone likes to know the extra thing. Everyone likes to learn something cool that they could potentially show a friend later on. So I'll often throw that line in as well. So they're my setup instructions, okay? But what I really want to talk about is the difference between an instruction and a suggestion. Now, there are many different views about the nature of hypnosis, okay? Experts, academics, practitioners don't all agree. There isn't a consensus view, although there are some particularly popular and strong models of hypnosis. For me, there's one unique characteristic of hypnosis, and that characteristic is going to make the experience feel different to just following instructions. And that characteristic is sometimes called the classic suggestion effect. We're going to come to that in just a moment. This technique, and pretty much all of the techniques that I'm likely to use to get things started, inductions themselves, even the early routines that I'm going to show you based on this technique, are essentially built from or created with a mixture of 3 ingredients. Ingredient number 1 is I give you instructions to do stuff. I ask you to do things. I instruct you to do things. Can you place your hands out in front of you? Can you clasp your hands tight together, palms together, thumbs crossed? Can you put your first fingers up about an inch apart? Okay. So although I'm, asking you in a kind of reasonable and pleasant way, can you? Would you? Could you? This is actually known as a conversational postulate. It's kind of, slightly less pushy and abrasive, but you could just as easily say, put your hands out, bend your elbows, fingers up. That's up to you. That's a, personal style, I guess, an aesthetic choice. But I tend to be a little bit softer than that. So, can you place your hands out? Good. Can you clasp your hands together, palms together, thumbs crossed? Notice I'm very specific with my instructions. So if I say arms out and I gesture to shoulder height, then that's kind of where I want them. If I say palms together, thumbs crossed, I want to see you doing that. If your palms were like this, your fingers were, your thumbs were kind of on top like this, then I'd ask you to make an adjustment. Can you just cross your thumbs for me? So first of all, I'm going to be very, very specific with my instructions, and I'm going to see if you are following them to the letter. And if you're not, I'm going to do my best to correct your behavior. Okay? So there are instructions to do things. The second ingredient is instructions to imagine things. Now there are kind of 2 things that I'm going to ask you to imagine. One is the outcome. Your fingers will touch. Your hands will lock. But the second thing is the means that's going to make that happen, or seemingly make that happen. The magnets, the glue, right? So whenever you look at your hypnotic technique, you're reading through it, perhaps you're learning something from a script. I want you to just be asking yourself, is this just an instruction? Is it an instruction to do something? Is it an instruction to imagine something? And if it is, is it asking them to imagine the means to a certain end, or is it asking them to actually imagine that outcome? You'll find that every technique is peppered, riddled with such instructions. Okay. Now the thing about instructions is if you follow my instructions, certainly we can create an effect. But the real thing about instructions is if you follow my instructions, your subjective experience will be what I call a doing. If I ask you to put your hands out and you do, then you feel in control of that action. It feels entirely voluntary. And that's nice, but that's not hypnosis. So instructions are there to be followed. And the good news is 100% of people have the capacity to follow your simple instructions. Of course, they can choose not to. If they choose not to, then they have misunderstood their role. Maybe they're just nervous about having the experience, or maybe they just want to, mess it up. That's up to them. Hypnosis is collaborative. We need to make that clear to people. You're going to work with them to give them this experience. Even if they're nervous about it, that's fine. Instructions to do, instructions to imagine. Again, if I ask you to imagine something, again, that action, albeit a mental one, is mostly voluntary. It feels voluntary. It feels like something you are doing. That's fine too. So now we come to the third ingredient. The magical ingredient that's going to turn this into a hypnotic experience. And that third ingredient, well, I don't know if you're there already, is suggestion. Now, what is suggestion? I get to teach hypnosis and hypnotherapy to groups of people online and in person all around the world. And very often I will say, okay, guys, what do you mean by suggestion? What is your definition? Or just, what do you mean when you say that word? Because hypnotists use it quite a lot. And you get a vast variety of responses. Right? But I've got to say, because I ask this question a lot, very rarely do I get this answer. And I believe this to be the correct answer. Okay, so a suggestion, however it's transmitted, communicated, given or shared, words, verbally, non-verbally, whatever, a suggestion implies that your response to it will be automatic, non-volitional. Let me make it clearer. It will be experienced as a happening. Imagine a spectrum. On one end, we have a sense of being in control, of doing, of things being voluntary. And on the other end, we have a sense of things being automatic, being involuntary, being experienced as a happening. Our task as hypnotists is to slide along that spectrum to turn a doing into a happening. Your task as the subject is to tune in to the experience of something happening. That's it. That's the essence of a hypnotic experience right there. It's almost like a paradox in that we collaborate so that you can have a non-volitional experience. Again, non-volitional doesn't mean against your will. It just means it happens automatically. And this is the key. So listen again. Can you place your hands out in front of you? It's an instruction. Can you clasp them together, palms together, thumbs crossed? Is an instruction. Can you put your first fingers up an inch apart? Is an instruction. Now listen to this line. Look at the gap between them because in a moment they will touch. Because in a moment they will touch. I haven't said push them together. I haven't said move your fingers together. I haven't said the next step is to touch your fingers. I've said, look at them because in a moment they will touch. That's a suggestion right there. That truly is a suggestion. So what happens next? You know, we've got this far just with instructions and one suggestion. So let's go further. What happens next? We're going to state the outcome. They're going to touch. Just like they're magnets. They're getting closer. The closer they get, the stronger it becomes. That's right. And when they touch, close your eyes. In other words, we give a bunch of suggestions that state the outcome, that illustrate a means. You know, essentially that's an instruction to imagine around an idea that could make it feel that way or could match up to your experience. And then we end with a clear instruction. And when they touch, allow your eyes to close. We could make that a suggestion. And when they touch, your eyes will close. Okay, so that's step one in unpacking this technique. Let's just recap. Okay, all of these hypnotic techniques are created with 3 ingredients: instructions to do, instructions to imagine, suggestions that things will happen. Hypnosis is a collaborative effect. It requires that your participant is on board, is engaged, is curious. And it requires that you observe closely and ensure that they're following your instructions to the letter so that you can then see if they're experiencing the effect of your suggestions. Tomorrow, we're going to go a little bit further. I'm going to get into the next kind of magical bit of secret sauce, emotion, and how we can utilize that to create stronger and stronger effects. I'll see you there.